Hello, my name is Merryana Salem. I am here with my co-host, Duriad Hark. Welcome to GayV Club, where we analyse usually LGBT texts that we like, that we don't like, and how we relate to them as people of colour who are gay, whomst are gay.
Who are also they.
Who are also they. Gay and they.
Yeah.
The gay theys. But, today we're doing something a little different, because this week is the 1-year anniversary of the Succession series finale.
Woo!
The crowd goes wild. Oh, I miss it so much.
There's another time. Just end of an era.
End of an era.
Oh.
As our listeners may know, it's one of our favourite shows. It was created by Jesse Armstrong, and in celebration of the anniversary, this episode is part 2 to our big gay Succession analysis episode after we did part 1 last year. We're so excited to record this, guys.
Yeah, because, if not now, when?
If not now, when? I would have made Dad do it anyway, because I have things to say that I didn't get to finish saying. But, But
yeah, much has happened since the final episode a year ago, with Open Eyes aired, including many, many Emmys and other awards and stuff. But also, Rupert Murdoch he quote-unquote retired.
Yeah. Sadly not from life, just from working.
Just from work. And he put Lachlan in charge. So his son Lachlan. So congratulations to Team Roman, I guess. Yeah, so in this episode, in part 2, we're going to be talking about the characters Matsson, Shiv, and Mencken. Please listen to part 1 first.
Yes.
I think it's some of our best work.
I genuinely, I love it.
That's up there.
I, who was there when we recorded it and recorded it with you, have re-listened to this episode so many times, like, oh yeah, I totally agree.
So true, bestie.
So true.
Yeah. So in that episode, we discuss our main points about Roman and Kendall, as well as Succession's more explicitly gay characters like Stewie, Tabitha, Naomi, and Lawrence. And yeah, it's only 2.5 hours, guys. So if you haven't listened to it, go back there and then come back to this. So before we dive in, just a reminder, GayV Club, we're an independent podcast, so we really appreciate you for listening. If you can leave reviews and recommend us to your friends, that would be great. We're on all the socials. We also have a Patreon, got lots of bonus episodes. We've also recently started doing weekly recaps of Interview with the Vampire Season 2.
And we know if you're Succession heads...
Yeah.
You're probably watching Interview with the Vampire. I feel like they have a significant overlap.
Yeah, it's called Taste.
It's called Taste, yeah.
Yeah, so if that sounds good to you, patreon.com/GayVClub. Most of the proceeds, actually, we use them to go to film festivals and things like that. So yeah, by supporting us, you're helping to support other LGBT artists and just cinema in general. So...
Actually, the real overlap between Interview with the Vampire fans and Succession fans are like the Eric Bogosian...
Yeah!
The Eric Bogosian stance. Which I am one, so I'm with you. I enjoy that man thoroughly.
So on to the actual episode. Just some quick refresher notes at the start. Even if you did listen to part 1, this is also for our benefit as much as you. So Succession, it has very deliberate queer subtext throughout the show. And another thing that's really key to understanding Succession is homosociality and homosocial misogyny, which describes the intimacy between men through which they uphold patriarchy and subjugate and exclude women, and just behaviors in which men prioritize one another and maintain patriarchy. So in Succession, there's lots of overlap between homosociality and gay subtext.
Yeah.
Language is really important, as sexual language is used by all of these characters to discuss business. Because as Kendall Roy says, business is their fucking. And that's how most of the gay subjects in this show manifests.
There's also explicit homophobia, as we say. And I think we first said it in relation to Succession. For there to be homophobia, there must be homotobophobia too, usually. The characters on this show and the privilege that they have does make them untouchable from all the other sort of isms and phobias, like in the public eye and within their family. But homophobia, sexism, toxic masculinity are some of the few oppressive systems that can be weaponized against them, or at least weaponized, like, personally. And of course, the main place that we see this is in Logan Roy's distinct homophobia and how it affects how the characters are treated and interact in major ways. Understanding how homophobia works in Succession is really key to understanding like how this show works as a whole and what it says about these characters and how they abuse each other on like a micro level and also a macro level, because Succession is a show where everything that's happening in the micro is played out in the macro as well. And it's just one of the many, like homophobia is one of the many harmful ideologies that the Roys and the billionaires that they are based on inflict upon the world through their media empire.
Boo.
Boo News Corp, we hate
you so much. Okay. Previously on Gay V Club, after my very thorough explanation about how Kendall's vehicular manslaughter is gay, I said, you know what's also gay about Kendall? His numbers. Which is Matsson's most iconic line, I think.
It really is.
So as we've established, most of the homophobia that's employed against Robin, it's like a personal attack pertaining to his character, while the homophobia that's directed at Kendall is always about his relationships with other men. And another one of these guys is Matsson, played by Alexander Skarsgård, and he's first introduced in season 3, Too Much Birthday. And he's also the winner of the entire show, by the way. He just, yeah. I don't know if that's important, but...
That's what happened, you know?
Yeah. He succeeds the succession, you know? Oh yeah, so Lucas Matsson he's a character that represents big tech in late stage capitalism, and his corporate empire is in competition to the old news media empire of the Roys, and he's based partially on existing tech billionaires, most notably Peter Thiel, like they've explicitly said this on the Succession podcast. For those who don't know, he's one of the OG crypto bros. He's very right wing, and he's also gay, which, you know, diversity loss. And so everything that Matsson does in this show is to each Roy sibling. It's a test so that he can figure out how he can use them to get the best deal possible. He will mirror and engage with whatever behavior he needs in order to do that. There's sexual subtext to all of his one-on-ones with the siblings. So initially, he fronts indifference, and I'm talking about indifference as a sales technique here, where you shift the balance of transaction by making people want more from you by acting like you don't actually care. This is something that even like I at my day job in sales use. Like it's really easy. Because like instead of asking someone to buy something from you, instead they are asking you to give it to them. And this tactic works pretty well in business. And if you're a cunt, you can also apply this tactic socially and romantically. And because this is Succession and Matsson is a cunt, he does this both ways.
Yeah.
So in season 3, we see him do this mainly with Ken and Roman because Shiv initially can't get through the door at all.
Quite literally can't get inside the treehouse.
I was looking up, you know, Lucas Matsson compilations on YouTube. To prepare for this episode, because it's been a while and I didn't have time to rewatch the entire thing. But one of the most insane things that he says to Roman in their earlier scenes together is he's just like, success doesn't interest me anymore. Like, it's too easy, you know, analysis plus capital plus execution, anyone can do that. And he's just like what can you even offer to someone like that? That's crazy.
Ultimate negging, like
yeah, ultimate negging. And so when he's just like, failure, that's what it's all about, like
and Roman's as much like, failure as oh my possible. God, failure, baby, I've got so much.
He has so much to offer. And so, yeah, like through this way, by giving nothing, he pushes Kendall and Roman to offer everything. And in addition to this, like he'll feign insecurity and uncertainty. Like, you know, I get too into people and they disappoint me. And this forces Roman in particular to make sure that they show all their cards. And then once Matsson figures out the specific kind of intimacy that each Roy sib wants from him, he starts playing them off each other, and he pretends that they're the only one he really needs. So with Kendall, it's just very basic. He just needs to match his bisexuality. So one of the visual languages that we've established from this show is that when Kendall goes out into the street at night and down a set of stairs or an escalator, we think that he's going to meet up with Stewie or call Stewie. And so one time I was absolutely blindsided by this.
You were baited.
Where Kendall does this once, and instead he's having a gay-ass FaceTime with Matsson instead, which is, yeah, you know, they used the Stewie trope to misdirect me. I did not appreciate that. And then with Roman, similarly, it is gay, but it's different in that first he tells Roman, I just want to deal with you, not your father. And on the surface, obviously that's to make Roman feel special. But also, I think there is an element to that with Matsson seeing if he can fix and or break, you know, depending on how you look at it, fix and or break Roman, who is terminally loyal to his dad, into becoming
Terminally.
Matson's pet instead. Yeah. So, like, this dog master dynamic, it is stronger with Mencken, but I think that Matson does do this with Roman too.
Yeah.
That scene is so funny where he's, like, goading Roman into talking shit about his dad. Like, when is your dad gonna die? Because...
Yeah.
Because also, which is interesting, because, you know, Roman's love for Logan has been one of the biggest things standing in the way of Logan's downfall throughout this entire show on many occasions. In addition to this, Matson just immediately clocks Roman's degradation kink. He has him literally pissing on his own app. Mary, it's your time.
Okay, it's my time. So Roman famously can't be in bathrooms with women. In one of the first 4 episodes, his girlfriend is trying to just brush her teeth.
Or wife.
Or
possibly.
wife, whoever that was meant to be, is in the bathroom with him, and he's like, "Get out! I can't do anything while you're here." And she's like, "What do you mean?" But he can go to the bathroom when he offers Matson, "Hey, do you want to come and piss on the shared app?
Do you want to come into the bathroom and pee on my phone?
Piss on my phone?" And Matson, he's like, yeah, sure, bud. And I just want to add something that I only recently learned from reading the script books is that Roman keeps that phone.
Oh!
Yeah, he keeps it. So after the scene in the script book, later on in the night, he finds I was about to say butler, but just a staff person, and is like, "Yeah, can you go and put my phone in a bag of rice?" So he's gonna keep it, but I also want to point out he doesn't wash his hands either, and he
Ew.
Yeah, it's gross.
Men are disgusting.
Men are really
disgusting.
gross, but I turned this scene the intricate piss ritual scene. It's a play on the quote, you construct intricate rituals to touch the skin of other men, which to me that's Roman Roy to a T. You can definitely see this exact kind of behavior with Eddard. He always finds a way to be around men when they're pissing, which is very interesting.
Is it?
The first time we see it with Matson is here. Yeah, he keeps the phone, he doesn't wash his hand, and Matson doesn't wash his hand either when they shake hands in the bathroom. It's, I was watching this episode...
Why can't they just do coke like normal people?
Then in season 4, they climb up to the top of that goddamn mountain in Norway. And what does Matson start doing? He starts pissing. And that's when Roman starts being like, "You know what? I'm gonna start with my fucking monologue that will win me an Emmy." And I just find that very interesting that, even at the top of a mountain in Norway, Roman found a way to be with a man while he's pissing, which is interesting.
Okay, how do I follow this? Next dot point. Though Matson represents... Yeah. So Matson, he represents a different era of capitalism, but he's very much the most like Logan. Total shark, and he's the only one who could stand up to Logan in the assault. And he actually killed him. He actually killed him. He bought him and then killed him. Amazing. And, once it's for Matson, once it's not actually necessary to play nice with the Roy bros, he doesn't
do it.
He starts dropping that facade and he becomes more dominant and he asserts his masculinity. In the episode Kill List, they go to Norway, which is his domain. He decimates them. He uses language barriers against them. He also, just physically reminds them that he's 6'4" and looking down on all of them. He takes off his shirt, exposes his abs for a little bit. And, then of course there's his oodles of money. Because at the end of the day, money is what makes them. And, for good measure as well, because he's so much like Logan. He also, channeling Logan, he also just whips out the homophobia quite randomly when he tells Kendall that his numbers are gay.
Very much like Logan as well, he uses Shiv to drive a wedge. Just for the cherry on top. Kill List is really the first time that Matson and Shiv interact, because in homosocial fashion, all the other times, Shiv is not, literally physically not able to access the space where they are.
He didn't let her into the treehouse.
Yeah. So at the start of Kill List, he finally meets Shiv, and he's really predatory. He hugs Ken and Roman, no problem. And then when it gets to Shiv, he's like, "Oh, if I hug you, do I get a lawsuit? Haha." Is a test to see, if she's basically just one of the guys. He even goes so far as to tell her that he's essentially stalking his ex and sending her bags of his blood. And not only is she his ex, she's his employee on top of that. So just really testing how much Shiv is okay with that level of vileness.
Fucking over other
Being
women.
shitty to other women, which of course, because she was raised by Logan Roy, she is fine with it. I shouldn't laugh, that's really bad.
Oh my god, Lucas, didn't you watch the DC episode from season 2? Like...
Yeah, Lucas! Weren't you there? It's not sexual, as in he's, like, flirting with her because he wants to fuck her. Although he kind of does, but, like, that's not the point.
At first it's not.
At first. But it's that he's speaking to the gender dynamic that is accepted in corporate settings. But, like, as we said, the techniques and lines that he uses on Shiv are lines and techniques that we've already seen him use on Roman and Kendall. So in the same way that his first request of Kendall is, like, make yourself useful to me before I even make eye contact with you, which
Privacy,
I
pussy,
think is his
pasta.
most iconic. But because I relate. But he asks Shiv to come up with a strategic action plan on how to deal with a potential sexual harassment scandal on the spot, which is the aforementioned, you know, him literally sending bags of his blood to
Blood
his
popsicles.
ex, who is also his employee. He asks her to come up with an action plan for that on the spot, which she does. Layers of irony there, but also we know she's good at this because we saw her do it.
Because we watched the DC episode.
Yeah, which obviously Mattson didn't. He doesn't know that she's already very good at this.
Yeah. Yeah, he wasted his time.
God, Mattson, why don't you watch Succession? But yeah, once she does pass the test, Mattson then starts using the same methods on her as he did with Kendall and Roman, like the same words, the same thing of like, I only want to deal with you, not your brothers, you know, that's just, I only want to deal with you, not your father, 2.0, or 3.0, 2.0. Like, poor Shiv, she doesn't even get, like, original fucking methods of manipulation.
No. Literally recycled. But I mean, yeah. If the sexual subtext wasn't obvious while he was doing this with other men, it is now definitely that he is playing Shiv, who is a woman. He says similar things that he said to Roman, like, you know, I get too into things, I don't have good boundaries, but more key is that, in particular with Shiv, what she wants to hear is that she's like her dad, and that's what he tells her. He's just like, wow, you're cool, you're not judgy, right? You know, like your dad, you know, you're a cool girl. Dude, I was reading the script of that scene, and I don't remember if this is in the actual show, but that scene opens with Shiv. She's on the phone. She's just like, oh, we have to figure out, like, you know, my dad's burial, and, you know, Mattson's just like in the ground, and she's like, yeah, unless you want to mount him up on your wall because you fucking killed him.
No, like, that's not in the show. Oh my god. That's such a...
But she says it, like, in a jokey way. Like, she's... like, she thinks that's funny. And
sorry,
yeah.
I imagine Sarah Snook...
Like, he knows.
Sorry for moaning like that. I just imagine Sarah Snook
I know.
But yeah, I do want to say... I do want to say, like, you know, your point about the sexual tension... But no, I actually do think the scene between Roman and Mattson when he's in Italy to go and see Mattson, and Mattson's like, oh, my house, it's just not my taste, and it's
look at my romantic
Italian villa. And they're just being all like, I get too into people, tuck my hand behind my ear, like in front of this big romantic Italian villa. I'm like, what is that if not like sexual tension? Like, I don't know. What's going on? Hello? But yes, obviously now that we're seeing him do that with Shiv, and he is, well, not at first, but later definitely is, like, into her sexually, it's like, yeah, it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like, it's
the
he's
same
literally
picture.
doing the same
it's the
thing.
same picture.
So in case you don't have, you know, the mind, the intellectual... in case you don't have the intellect to see how gay it originally was, yeah, it is. It definitely is now. Because, yeah, he does... tap into Shiv's desire to be seen as seriously as her father, but also in her desire to humiliate her brothers. I really love that scene. I think it's at the end of Kill List where he calls up Shiv, and the vibe of it is so like, you know, are you alone? Send nudes. But instead he's asking her to take a photo of her brothers, like after he's absolutely decimated them. Which is yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. And when part 1 came out, Mary made a very, very lovely graphic of the Roy siblings, Spit sisters, map and how all their relationships with other people relate to each other and how small their dating pool is. We didn't include Mattson on that because ultimately, you know, they don't actually get him. You know, failed to obtain spit. But if
he's the unobtainium.
But you know, you can if you have a look at it, because look, I swear it's like my favorite thing. It's like one of my favorite things that we've made. Like, have a look at it on the Instagram or something. You can imagine how he fits on there.
I just want to talk about briefly what it was like for me, a romancing truther, in the interim period between season 3 and season 4, and then how funny it was for season 4 to happen the way that it did. I don't know. I do want to friendship because this is just funny, and sorry to out myself as someone who was at one point so brainwormed that I was looking at fanfiction. But, like, it is really, really funny that, like, so many... I stopped reading it because it was really fucking bad. But, like, you know, there were so many fanfictions, like, post-season 3, before season 4, where it was like, oh, Mattson's gonna swoop in and fucking save Roman from his terrible family, or, like, you know, Roman and Mattson are gonna team up and, like, take over Wayside. Like, all of these things. And all of these fanfics had, like, this, you know, this kind of nice subtext to them, that this was actually going to be a relationship. I'm not that silly, okay? That's why I call myself a truther, not a shipper. But I think it was it was so funny when season 4 like happened, and he just, you know, Mattson just fucking kills all of them. Like, it was just like, there is no special connection that he has with any of them, let alone Roman. He eats them all. And I just thought
one by fucking
it was just so funny, like, given the way that people had over 2 years, because there was like a 2-year gap between season 3 and season 4, or nearly 2 years. People had, you know, come up with all this, like, oh, this is what's going to happen between, and it just didn't. But one thing I did think about, because as I said, I'm a truther, not a shipper, because at the time we'd only really seen Mattson form this kind of connection with Roman. I thought, oh, I bet he'll like use Roman as this in to the company, and once he's there, he will just betray him. Once he's fully cemented there and there's nothing they can do to get rid of Mattson's claws in the company, he'll just dump Roman. And as soon as Roman saw Mattson as the guy who killed their dad, I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. And I was really fascinated to see the exact thing that I thought was going to happen actually play out with Shiv, which did feel like very validating to me and like what I thought would happen. But also, like, you know, I was a little bit like, you know, I really was, you know, what do you mean these characters who were like, you know, the metaphors for like tech and late capitalism, what do you mean they didn't have gay sex? Like, what do you mean instead? Like, heteronormativity is a curse. But anyway, a lot of the reasons why I'm a truther is just because I was obsessed with how Kieran Culkin and Alexander Skarsgård just had insane chemistry instantly. Two actors, if they have insane chemistry, that like lights my brain on fire. And then what equally made their chemistry crazy for me is how quickly it was just shut the fuck down after Kill List. Was like there was nothing. It was gone. It was cold. Like they killed it. Like, they murdered it. They smashed it with a rock. I mean, it's just remarkable to me, and it just makes me wonder how anyone could trust actors. Like, what the fuck? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
I love talent. But yeah, look, you know, we accept. I should have said this earlier, but, you know, for me, I definitely think that Kendall and Mattson have hooked up. I do. I just believe that. As I said, truth or not a ship. And I know, Dare, you mentioned before, like, the scene where Mattson, you know, takes off his shirt, and, you know, that whole scene where he's trying to be like, look at my big, cool, like, private house in Norway, and I brought you all here, and now look at my ab. Obviously, that is a show of, like, how much more masculine he is than them, but, like, you know, when he does it, like, the
reactions are so funny. Like, you, of course, as a Roman enjoyer, like, you zoom into Roman, who is just, he's too embarrassed to look, obviously, which is very gay, but also Kendall, who is, you know, famously has no shame. He does not look away.
No. It's like, if you're gay, you're one of two people, like, which one are you?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, look, these are my truly horny thoughts, is that I think the scene with Shiv and Mattson on the plane where she's like, oh, I'm just stopping to fuel here.
Boy on the outside.
Stopping, and he walks in his stupid little flip-flops across from his little private jet to her. Look, once again, if you didn't want me to root for Shiv's adultery, don't have dudes that I find hot hit on her, like,
my girl on the inside, boy on the outside. They were insane for that. Also, just that scene, he dug into the Eric Northman archives for that. I should say, in between seasons 3 and 4, I watched True Blood, and it changed my life. I I didn't give a shit about Alexander Skarsgård. I watched season 3 of Succession, was just like, oh yeah, it's this guy. But yeah, Eric Northman, he's my favorite. Eric and Pam. Yeah, so watching Kill List, one of the first things I'm like, he's got, frozen blood popsicles like a vampire. And I think also as well, there's some intertextuality there, like some blonde bisexual vampire intertextuality, because as one of our friends Erica pointed out, when Matsson says, privacy pussy pasta, it's pretty much the same sentiment as Lestat in Interview with a Vampire, saying that like all desires boil down to 3 things, which is, I want food, I want sex, and I want to go home. That's privacy pussy pasta. Yeah. And why did he say it again?
Why not?
No, he said it to Mencken. That's crazy. But yeah, obviously, despite all of this, aside from, the very slutty way that he got there, he is an antagonist who won in the end.
Yes, he is the antagonist who won in the end. So we briefly mentioned before at the top of this section that it's been confirmed that one of the figures that Matsson was inspired by is Peter Thiel. I agree with that because to me, what Matsson represents is all money with no real innovation, which is Peter Thiel and also Elon Musk, the technocrats that are like leading the whole like big tech thing. And what they represent is quite parasitical, because big tech is ultimately like very parasitical. It is not a piece of innovation that actually like bolsters anything. To me, it just eats everything, and that is quite tragic. It's not that I feel sorry for people like the Roys, but it's more just like watching how tech kind of eats up everything and doesn't actually make it better. That's what I can really see in play with Succession, which is that in this final season of Succession, which is that, you kind of caught big tech and it seems really exciting at first, like it's going to make everything better and more magical. But then once it's there, you can't get rid of it and it just keeps eating and eating and eating. We've seen that in real life. Like, look at what's happening with Twitter and Elon Musk. That's probably the big example that you can see of this dynamic in play, about how big tech doesn't really offer anything new and exciting. But I think one piece of media that I constantly thought about, especially in season 4, looking at the way that Matsson interacts with the Roys and obviously specifically Roman, I always think about the dynamic between Sean Parker and Mark Zuckerberg in the film The Social Network. Now, putting aside like whether or not The Social Network is portraying something that's 100% true, I think that dynamic where, the scene, I'm assuming our listeners have seen the cinematic masterpiece that is The Social Network, but in case you haven't, there's a scene in The Social Network, this is towards like the last third of the movie, where Sean rings Mark about getting arrested and Mark doesn't help him. And he kind of uses that as an excuse to give Sean the boot from the company. Not really, Sean still has shares in the company, but it's very much implied after that Mark may have called the cops on the party that Sean was at. And you get this like insane moment where you're like, oh, you know what, like Sean Parker like was an asshole, but this is somehow like a fucked up thing to do to him. And I think the thing about Sean Parker is that while his contributions to Facebook's code might be negligible, like his contribution to transforming and growing Facebook wasn't, and neither was his contribution in general to, I'm looking for a word like communitizing. Like, that dude, like Sean Parker invented peer-to-peer sharing. Like, I'm not trying to say that he's a good person, but to say that he didn't do anything is like a really odd thing to say. Like, he contributed something that, is still used. Some of his code, like his peer-to-peer sharing code, is used to this day in like Spotify, iTunes, and things like that. And the reason why I bring up Mark and Sean in The Social Network in relation to the Roys and Matsson is that in the Roys, you have people who actually made something. Whether it's good or bad doesn't really matter, but Logan built Waystar, right? He made a media empire, and yes, it's evil, and yes, it doesn't contribute net good to the world, but you can't deny that he actually made something. But Matsson hasn't, and it's revealed to us that not only has he not made anything, everything that he's claimed to have made, it's been made up, like it's fudge. He got like I think they call it like a toolbox, and he just claimed that he invented everything that was in the toolbox. And this is, to me, I think this is a reference to Elon Musk, who loves to claim that he was a co-founder of PayPal when he wasn't. And the scene where Mark in The Social Network fucks over Sean for no real reason other than the blind ambition and disregard, you kind of watch it with this like hollow space in your chest, because you're like, wow, these tech types, they don't really care about the people who are even who were even like them, like the people who made their success possible. And to me, like, technocrats are just libertarians. Libertarians are people who don't believe in government oversight. To me, they're just like libertarians who have hard-ons for AI, and they truly just want to use the technological frontier as their dominion, and they have no regard for like the tangible harm that they're causing people who don't align with themselves or their vision. And it is weird, but by the end of season 4, like, watching Mattson play the Roys and take Waystar, it made me feel like really sad, because it's not even that I particularly care for Fox News or the people who get rich off it, but what I do care about is what we should all care about, I think, which is that I think that it's wrong. I think that it's wrong when men like Mattson, who haven't actually made anything, like anything at all, wield power that is so unchecked that nothing, like not even legal bodies or regulatory bodies or corporations or conglomerates, like none of them can actually stop them, like parasitically taking over everything. Like, I think, to me, like, that is one of the great tragedies of Succession, is that this guy, like, got a hold of everything that their dad built and just gutted it. I think it's also, like, plays into the idea that, like, capitalism just can't sustain itself, and that's why you open up to the jaws of tech. Mattson and Roman, especially, like, in that first scene, it is so, like, flirty. It is so, like, wow, like, this could be great. This could be amazing. All the things that they could do together, and it's, like, really exciting, and it's kind of sexy. And, like, I think that represents what ultimately, like, big tech was. When it started out, it was really exciting. Like, I think people our age can remember, like, how exciting it was when Google became a thing that everyone widely used, and Facebook was getting apps, and you can message people, and it was all very exciting. But, like, now, you know, we're living in an era where all of these innovations in tech, not only do they just bolster the worst aspects of capitalism, but they ultimately, like, just further cannibalize it and push it further towards fascism as well. Mattson is just that made manifest as a person, the attitude of tech over time condensed into a person and how he interacts with people. And I really do think that the way Mattson was with Roman and Logan gets really nasty really quickly, and it turns out that he was always like that, and actually there's no way of stopping him. Like, to me, that's the tech bubble boiled down into a human relationship, right down to them, like, desperately trying to use legal means to get rid of him, and they can't. You know, we saw that with the Cambridge Analytica scandal a couple of years ago with Mark Zuckerberg. Like, there is not even a legal body that can challenge these people, and it's really frightening. And yeah, obviously, when you have two men doing all of this, and when it is a greater allegory for this very parasitical and nasty relationship between profit and tech, it comes off as gay because there was literally a honeymoon phase, guys. There was a honeymoon phase where we were all enchanted by this and we all thought that it was going to be great until it wasn't. Because when you go back, tech is something that Logan and the others, they're all deathly afraid of it. Like, it's coming. It's this big looming storm that they can't fight. Even they're afraid of it. And it's just kind of, hell, it's kind of crazy that, well, one of the things that Roman managed to do successfully was to bring Mattson on board and destroy the company. Good job, bud! So, yeah, big tech makes me really sad. But also, when you distill it down into a person, kind of gay. Thank you.
Yeah, which brings me to Mattson and Tom. Mattson the winner and Tom the quote-unquote winner of Succession. So Mattson and Tom, their relationship, it's the I'm gonna say it's the elite version of Tom Gregg, in that it's like the final incarnation of hierarchy of abuse and subjugation of other men in business, because Tom offers himself up on a plate to be his puppet. Yeah, so this is always coming, of course. Like, it was Kendall that first told Tom in season 1 that Logan always said that his best employees he had were the people who ate shit for him without him ever knowing it. So Tom is the shit eater. There's so many just metaphors about this throughout the entire show. Like, he eats from the pig's trough and bore on the floor. There's even a joke in Tailgate Party about Mattson shitting in his mouth, which is, that line is not in the script, bro. This... Yeah, if you even want to take this further, Tom literally spends season 3, you know, helping Logan go to the bathroom. Like, Tom, his work ethic is insane. Like, he grinds 24/7, and he doesn't do it in kind of that quote-unquote cool, empowering way to show off his success like you would see more basic bitches do. Like, he makes it clear to everyone above him that he's their bitch, that he's doing it because he's their bitch, and, you know, that's kind of gay when you think about it.
He's gross.
Matsson clocks this. Like, Tom doesn't attend Logan's funeral because he's working. So, like, the way that he does his final test with Tom is, like, just ultimate emasculation. He sits him down and he tells him that he wants to fuck his wife. And, of course, Tom, he agrees to be, like, hypothetically cucked. Like, because the end result places him above Shiv anyway. And, one thing I did get to rewatch before we recorded this episode is I watched What It Takes for You, Mary. And, it's a good episode. And, in this episode, when Kendall is trying to get Tom on his side in the whistleblower case against Waystar, and he goes through it and he runs out of all his other arguments, he tries to play the Shiv card. He tries to tell Tom that if he does break out of this subservient shit-eater role and actually tries to destroy Logan, that it will make Shiv respect him. Which is so funny. Because one, it's like Kendall projecting, being like, if I destroy Logan, you know, it'll make him respect me. And Kendall's trying to say, you know, if you try to destroy Logan, it will make your wife respect you. But because Tom doesn't actually care about that. Tom doesn't want Shiv to respect him. He doesn't want to win respect from Shiv. He wants to
dominate her.
Yeah, he wants to just be able to dominate her. Which brings us to Shiv.
Yes. So the headline for this section is Shiv is not bisexual. She's not. I've seen this sentiment from quite a few different places, and I just wholeheartedly disagree with it. On the contrary, I think Shiv hates women, or in the very least, she sees them as very much inferior. She treats them the way she's treated because she thinks it will give her the same status as the men who treat her that way. It does not, obviously. And when she wants to have a threesome with Tom and that poor crew woman at the end of season 2, it's not because she's genuinely attracted to that woman. It's because, A, she wants to use this woman to emasculate Tom, because it's one of Shiv's favourite pastimes, and B, the show overall is making the point that she exploits the workers the same way the men do, because this is coming off the back of, like, the whole cruises scandal and how women were treated badly on the cruises, and wouldn't you know it, Shiv is also attempting to sexually exploit a woman on her family's private.
Yeah.
People throw around the term, like, internalized misogyny a lot. To me, like, Shiv is arguably, like, one of the best characters I've ever seen it exemplified in. She really does not care about the women around her at all. She hates Rhea when Rhea is getting close to her dad and possibly in line for the succession. She gives Jerry shit for not reporting Roman's sexual harassment, even though, like, Jerry is very clearly not the person in the wrong there. She doesn't help or care about Ebba, who is Matsson's ex.
And Director of Communications.
Mm-hmm. And not only does she not care about Ebba, but she and Kendall and Roman, like, they all pretend to care about her just to get dirt on Matsson. She does not see women as people. And it really does annoy me when people say that she's bi, because objectifying women like this and really not liking women and not caring about women like this in the way that men do, like, that's not bisexuality, guys. That's just misogyny. Like, I think people, they get the wrong idea, because she has that bisexual bob for a while. But, you know, she's not bisexual. It's literally a red herring, guys. It's a red herring. It's not real.
It's red hair.
It's red hair.
Haha, get it. Sorry, 2 out of 10. I shouldn't have said that. My dad jumped out.
Like, if Shiv had sex with a woman, that wouldn't be because she was gay. She'd probably just be doing it because she'd think it would get her, like, points from dudes or something. Like, it just wouldn't,
Like, she does this to emasculate Tom. Tom, throughout the series, he's, like, the only man that she does have power over. And, of course, Tom hates that. And, you know, he takes out his frustration with Shiv on Greg. And there's that cycle there. But, you know, in the end, he wins. And he does have that over her. And she decides to stay. Something also just important to understand about Shiv and her gender is she's the only girl/daughter. She's the only daughter. Mm-hmm. Which I can deeply relate to. So she is in a completely different, like, in Succession, she's in a completely different race to the boys. One could say, and many have said, that Shiv as a character is in direct parallel to Elizabeth Murdoch. She is the youngest, but also, like, no one really sees her as that because she doesn't have the room to slip up and be immature in the way that the boys do. And I feel like this is a very only daughter experience in that way. And she knows that as a girl, like, she's already started to fuck up. She's already got that strike against her and already started with the expectation that she will not and cannot succeed, which is why she tries to adopt the same exploitative behaviors as the men in her life through the way that she treats women, but also, you know, in the way that she uses homophobia against Roman and Kendall and stuff. Also, this is in her costuming as well. Logan, he dresses in very soft textures, like a wolf in sheep's clothing, and this is something that, yeah, Shiv also dresses like that when she's at home. And even speaking of at home, like the interior of her apartment with Tom, it's decorated using like very similar furniture and fixtures that you see in the Waste Del Roco offices, and their dining table literally just looks like a boardroom conference table. Like she, you know, she's not playing house, she's playing office.
She's living and breathing.
She's at home playing office. Like she is trying to replicate that as much as she, like, we know even from season 1 that she's trying to maneuver it so that Tom can get into the CEO position because she can't. And then, of course, in season 2, when it actually does start to seem a little bit possible for her that it could really be her, that's when, I'm not going to say that's when the problems start with Shiv and Tom, because but that's where that shifts. Shiv is in a different race to her brother because she is not even given the opportunity to actually work in the company. And when the series starts, she works as a political strategist. Which brings us to Mary's favorite episode.
My favoriteest episode in the whole wide world.
Because Kendall is hardly in it.
Look, I can't lie, that is a little bit of the appeal, but mostly not. I actually do wonder, like, I wonder a lot what it would have been like if he was on the inside with them and part of these conversations. I do actually think about that quite a lot. Like, would it have been different? Probably not, but, you know. So, like, as we were saying, you know, Shiv's been on the outside of the company, and this is often used against her, like, by her dad and by her brothers, like, oh, you don't even have any experience in the company, even though she was deliberately kept out. And where she has been dedicating her time is in the field of politics. And what it takes, one of the many, many reasons that I love it, is because it is the episode where if you really wanted to live in denial land about whether or not, oh, if they just gave Shiv the right opportunity in the right place, they would see that she's a good CEO. This is the episode that dispels with that, and the real reason that she's not in that race with her brothers, alongside her brothers, is because she's a woman. It's as simple as that. And the place that you can see this is in What It Takes, because the premise of this episode is that they are looking for a candidate they can back to be president, and the specific thing they're looking for is a candidate who will stand up to big tech and who will just parrot everything that they want as a corporation. So in What It Takes, they are going to the Future Freedom Summit, which is basically what they're trying to kind of spoof there is the CPAC conference. CPAC is the Conservative Political Action Conference, and it's kind of franchised now. You can go to these like all around the world. They recently had the one here in Australia, and they had fucking Tucker Carlson and Clive Palmer on a panel together. But yeah, CPAC is evil. It started in the Reagan era. That's all you need to know about it to just know like how evil it is. And at this conference, you know, basically all the conservatives, like, again, they're held in like every country now, but, you know, they started in America as a way for all the conservatives to get together and network and blah, blah, blah. And so the gang in succession, they go to the Future Freedom Summit to pick a new president. And this is Shiv's area of expertise. Like, I can't stress enough, like, if they were serious about Shiv being qualified, like this is where she is qualified, more than anyone else in the company she's keeping in this episode. Like, she is the one that knows the most about this, and she says this at multiple points.
They even say that. They're like, Shiv, you're in politics, what do you think?
Yeah. And they literally just don't listen to her. They don't give it, they don't care. I think it's also important to note though that, you know, anyone, and I think that it's really important to emphasize this, anyone that they picked from this conference is a bad, nasty, conservative asshole. Like, anyone they would have picked. It's just the degree to which that they are that.
Candidate that they would pick to support in the election through their media. Yeah.
There is no such thing as like a left or even center person who goes to CPAC or goes to the Future Freedom Summit. Like, they're all very right-wing, very conservative. So even though Shiv is here and she does object to Mencken being the candidate, I guarantee you her candidate would not have been that much better. Like, it would have still been,
It would still have been, you know, the decline of democracy.
Yeah. It just probably would have been a bit slower. But I think it's important to note that they still tell her in her element at a political conference, she is a political advisor, and she's a good one. She was
Is she?
Well, she was sought out.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's...
But for her connection to the Roys.
Well, yeah. But if she was really bad...
You claim to love this episode so much. Do you remember when Roman's like, oh, you've won how many elections?
Well, yeah.
Sorry.
Look, no, it's... look... She works in this. Like, this is her career.
It's her job.
This is her career, right? And even though this is her job, this is her career, they all tell her, like, at the end of the episode, they're all like, no, you're not qualified to be part of this conversation. You know, Roman teases her, like, hush now, big boys are talking, you know, like, she can't be part of this conversation, even though she is the most qualified person in the room to have that conversation. Like, babes, guys, that's literally sexism. Like, there's no other reason that they wouldn't want her to be part of that conversation. Other than the fact that, well, they just don't want her to be there because she's a woman. But I think it's important to note that, you know, Shiv is still fighting to be in that room. Girl boss feminism, true girl boss feminism, was coined to literally describe this, the idea that there are women who will use their experiences with misogyny to fuel their desire to enact, like, the same harm on others and call it power. And to me, like, even though Shiv hates Mencken, like, and Mencken hates her because, well, Mencken's a fascist, of course he's going to hate her, she still won't actually do anything to stop this. Her complicity with this, like, it will have, like, a tangible effect on people's lives in the world of Succession, and we already know that from when Kendall gets the call that his daughter is being treated racistly at school.
Yeah.
Heaps of people experience misogyny. It doesn't make you a feminist, it just means that you are affected by this system. And I think Shiv is probably at least one of the best characters that sort of demonstrates that I've ever seen. And still manages to be, like, quite a compassionate, relatively compassionate portrayal of that, because I don't think at any point the show portrays the misogyny she experiences as something that she deserves, because it isn't. It's not a punishment for, like, who she is. It is just part of the reality that she lives in, and she's very shaped by her reality, and that's why she's so misogynistic.
So our final section is on the character Mencken, Jared Mencken, who was one of Roman's guys. He's played by Justin Kirk of Angels in America fame.
But yeah, guys, you want to know, like, a fun fact about capitalism that isn't very fun? It actually, like, kind of needs fascism to survive.
Stop saying kinda.
Sorry.
Just say it. It needs to.
It needs fascism to survive. Not kinda. It does. It needs fascism to survive. To quote noted British Union organiser J.T. Murphy, quote, "Fascism is not an alternative to capitalism. It is capitalism in its most desperate, violent form. It is a product of the crisis of capitalism, aiming not at replacing capitalism by a new social order, but by organisation of a party and state, seeking to save capitalism by crushing and destroying every element within society which resists capitalism." So fascism props up capitalism in a period of crisis. And what are the Roys, if not a big old allegory for capitalism in crisis? Personified. Personified, sorry.
Sorry, I just love how bad
personified. They are capitalism in crisis, personified. And what is Jared Mencken as a character, if not the two-faced face of fascism, personified? And what is the scene of Mencken and Roman in that bathroom, if not a literal showcase of how capitalism, at its lowest, will flirt with fascism, because capitalism does whatever it takes.
Like the episode title.
The episode title, to maintain power and privilege, and you can't do that without maintaining an exploitative status quo, and that's where fascism comes in. You know, boo.
Yeah, one thing is just, I love how, well, I don't love how, but the way that Mencken appears, he only appears in 3 episodes of this show, and very briefly, but he and what he represents, it still has such a looming presence over the final narrative. And of course, you know, in America Decides, the Roys using ATN to orchestrate Mencken's election win is, of course, like, it's a direct reference to Murdoch's hand in the Fox News election scandal that led to January 6th. And no, I won't mention ScoMo here.
Who cares about ScoMo?
Yeah, solid news. I think we also mentioned it
in
the first bit as well when we were talking about climate change. Oh my god, that line of what it takes wherever Logan's just like, I guess I'm what you'd call a climate denier. That's the most dad joke that Logan Roy has ever said in this show.
Honestly, I do. Like, when he's not being, like, really, really horrible, but even sometimes when he is, like, Logan is so
He's
funny.
the funniest
like,
bitch alive.
Like, he really is the funniest bitch alive. Like, Brian Cox's line delivery is just excellent. But anyway, in order to talk about Mencken and Roman, we're going to talk about the gay Nazi myth because
it's important.
It's important. And actually, for my thesis statement on Roman and Mencken, you really need to understand where I'm coming from with it. So the gay Nazi myth is kind of the myth or trope, if you like, that the Nazis were all like secretly gay and, you know, really into each other. And it was originally intended to like delegitimize the patriarchal and misogynistic hierarchy by implying it was gay and therefore that they themselves were hypocrites.
Like it's propaganda.
Yeah, it's propaganda. The trope, you know, this trope or myth, like all myths, it does have some grain of historical truth behind it, and that is Ernst Röhm, who was a co-founding member of the Nazi Party, and he headed up the SA, otherwise colloquially known as the Stormtroopers. In the run-up to the Nazis gaining power of the Reichstag, the German parliament, in 1933, a series of letters were published by the left-wing Democratic Socialist Party that essentially outed Röhm to the more general public. But he was pretty openly gay among the party already. Like, this was known about him and also known by people in the SA. And he also frequented Berlin's gay clubs, but I wouldn't say that he was very welcome at those clubs. There is a lot of record of him reporting people for homosexual conduct to the police while he himself was doing homosexual conduct. Like, he was not for the community.
He was a cunt.
He
was a Nazi cunt.
You know, I know there's some debate with this term, but Röhm was as openly gay as one could be at the time. He very much was. But when they ran this press campaign trying to weaken perceptions of the Nazi Party in the early 1930s, just before they gained power in 1933, they really honed in on Röhm's sexuality, and they leaked letters that he had sent to various people where he talked about his sexuality. There's a documentary on Netflix that I've talked about on the podcast before called El Dorado, Everything the Nazis Hate, and they go into this scandal much more in depth than I'm going to here, but like it really is quite interesting in terms of how it shaped Hitler's and the party's general views on homosexuality, this scandal. It's not what you expect initially, but it's quite interesting. Also, obviously, heavy warning for anti-Semitism and homophobia and everything like that if you do watch it. But yeah, the Democratic Socialist Party ran this whole campaign, even a series of comics that portrayed Röhm as basically being quite predatory and using his position as head of the Stormtroopers to perv on young men, basically. And they had like sketches of and comics of men in the Stormtroopers, you know, just doing gay stuff or just doing stuff that would be considered gay. And it was also propaganda that was designed to undermine the Nazis very quickly gaining power. It didn't work, obviously, but nevertheless, it did some PR damage. One of the earliest uses of the term, like homosexual agenda, was used by Hitler in a speech in 1933 where he is addressing these rumors about the SA and the party directly. And after this instance, like Röhm was asked directly by Hitler and the higher-ups in the Nazi party to take a step back from things because he was embarrassing them out there. Ultimately, Röhm was killed in 1934, shortly after Hitler addressed these quote-unquote issues in the Night of the Long Knives, because he became too much of a liability to Hitler and the party, because in part of his sexuality and what his perceptions of his sexuality was doing to the reputation of the party, but also because Röhm was a very powerful member of the Nazi Party, and there was quite a large group of the SA that were very, very loyal to him, and Hitler was quite frightened. So, yeah, he had him murdered as part of the Night of the Long Knives in 1934 when he killed a bunch of Jewish members of parliament as well as members of his own party, and so that's the little kernel of truth at the core of the gay Nazi trope. It is, and I really can't stress this enough, like that trope and that myth is rooted in homophobia. It is rooted in weaponizing homophobia to get people to hate the Nazis and, you know, weaken perceptions of the party. And I think also to this is that just because someone is gay, that doesn't mean they won't align themselves with power. They won't align themselves with the desire and ambition for power. And something I'm going to talk about, especially in relation to Roman and Mencken, the interesting lesson to take from what happened to Ernst Röhm is that you can literally be like a co-founding member of this party. You can support these people. You can essentially, you know, the Nazis, whether or not they would have gained power without the paramilitary force of the SA is quite questionable. And that is down to Ernst Röhm's coordination of the SA. But the fact that he did all that is just shows like he's still not a good person just because he's gay. It also shows that just because he did all that, that didn't save him, ultimately. As soon as he was a liability, higher-ups of the Nazi party were happy to cut and run once they had actually gained power. So, like, when I think about Mencken and Roman, which is more than I would care to admit on the podcast, but I guess I am now. But I am kind of obsessed with narratives that deal with the link between like capitalism and fascism, and that's what these two characters are. They are the link, and their connection to one another is that link made into a person. And these scenes between Mencken and Roman that we see, and there really are only two of them.
Yeah.
Two of them. To me, they're like really complicated, but ultimately to me, they are not the gay Nazi myth. And I did see a lot of people say this at the time, that like, oh, look at this, like they're, you know, perpetuating the myth of gay Nazis, which again is rooted in homophobia. But to me, it's actually more of a return to that actual like kernel of historical truth. It's not using queerness or queer subtext as a way to like humiliate. It's showing that fascists will use anyone to help get ahead until that person becomes too much of a liability. Because on one level you can see that those interactions between them are like good old-fashioned homosociality, where they're two men in a very male-exclusive space talking about power and how to keep it, which is the definition of homosociality. But Roman... the fact that it's Roman in this conversation, and we've talked extensively about the queer subtext attached to Roman, so I don't need to go back into that. So there's that, and then there's also the image of, you know, they are two men in a bathroom, and as we've talked about,
there's a queer history there to that imagery.
Yeah, and there's also like in this scene where they are talking to each other in the bathroom in What It Takes, they're also like obsessively rubbing lotion on their hands in this scene, which has a very sexual connotation to it, the way they're also looking at each other. There's also just some insane chemistry going on here, which I felt like I was hallucinating at the time. But Justin Kirk explained with a very interesting explanation that the scene was the first scene that he'd filmed post-lockdown. And he just says, I quote, he was intoxicating to be breathing Kieran's air. And it's like, well, okay, thanks, Justin. That's somehow even more gay than just saying the scene was gay. But I just think that there was just so many layers to what Jesse Armstrong is doing with the queerness here. All those layers, like from Justin Kirk's casting to all of Roman's subtext, the history of gay men in bathrooms, the lotion. Like, I don't think it necessarily adds up to Jesse Armstrong saying, oh, like, Nazis, you know, they're gay, ha ha ha, very funny. Because I think you can definitely see that trope at play in things like Jojo Rabbit and The Producers. But it's actually taking this seriously. It's actually saying that in reality, as much as we may not like it, people who you wouldn't expect to do align themselves with fascism, and they do it because they want to maintain and gain power. We'd love to think that evil is a very simple thing, but the people that do it, and I think this is a point that Succession makes really well over and over again, are like humans, and humans are complex, and there's no shortage of people with complicated, marginalized experiences who actively will work against themselves and their own interests. Like Peter Thiel, like, who was that lady that just tried to run for president?
Nikki Haley?
Yeah, Nikki Haley. She's from a Sikh family, and she was fully running for president with the Republicans. And, you know, she didn't win enough primaries. And she was recently on a podcast with a bunch of other Republicans, and they were like, well, yeah, we wouldn't vote for you, Nikki, because of your immigrant background. And, sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but, like, I don't know what she expected. But there are plenty of examples throughout history of people who you just wouldn't expect, aligning themselves with power because people want power, and fascism is like a very successful, unfortunately, methodology to maintain power and gain power. I also don't necessarily think that Mencken and Roman's connection is just a literally gay one, but it's showing the metaphorical layers of how capitalism flirts with fascism and vice versa, and how it will pretend it's something new, like this is something new, when it isn't. Like, this has happened over and over again throughout history, and to me, that's what that scene is. And the fact that it's in a bathroom, and the fact that we now have, like, America Decides, we know that that simple conversation, like, in the bathroom between Roman and Mencken, that decided the fate of an election. It's not just about, like, ooh, is it a bit gay? It's like, no, this started down a path that is irreversible.
There's also, you know, like, when you just view Roman as a person quite isolated socially for, you know, reasons that we've already explained, men like that go on fucking Reddit and become indoctrinated into fascism. That is
they're so like, easily radicalized.
Yeah, they are radicalized into fascism. And Roman's an example of that.
He is.
On a much larger scale, because he is a guy that actually has the power to really put it in place.
Exactly. The reason why I brought up Rom and that history specifically is because I think you can draw a direct parallel to the fact that as soon as the Nazis gained power, as soon as it was not convenient, it was no longer convenient, as soon as, like, Rom showed that he was going to be a liability and a weakness for the party, he was gone.
Church and state.
You can see that's literally what happens in Church and State when Roman gets up on that podium
and cries in front of everyone.
And I couldn't believe, like, I screamed. I was watching this episode at home and I screamed when the camera, like, when he starts crying, it cuts straight to Mencken grinning because he's like, fuck yeah, I don't have to deal with this person anymore. Like, I can just cut him loose. Like,
he's out.
Like, he's out. And for the rest of that episode, when Roman does try to talk to Mencken just ignores him, has nothing to say. Mencken just moves on because he doesn't need Roman anymore. He got the presidency. He doesn't need Roman. He doesn't need any of the Roys anymore. And I think it's very telling that in Church and State, the character you do see him speak to on a serious level is Matsson.
Yeah.
Roman and Mencken, like, I know that there are people that genuinely ship them out there, but to me, like, again, in the same way that I see, like, Matsson and Roman as this very interpersonal allegory for a relationship between these two systems or structures, that's the way I see Mencken and Roman, and I see it as a very serious and a very thoughtful, and pulls no punches either. There's nothing sympathetic. It's actually horrifying. Like, every time I watch that scene and what it takes, it's a horrifying conversation that they have with each other. It's disgusting.
The way that he says, so fascism is cool and everything, but also not.
Not?
You know, because it doesn't fucking matter to people like Roman. It doesn't.
No. I remember in our first episode, Dee, when you were talking about how Kendall goes and talks to the waiter at Shiv's wedding, and it has, like, a cruising vibe.
Mm.
And when Mencken approaches Roman at the bar, and of course we don't know who Mencken is at this point, and is like, tell me who you hate and I'll tell you who your enemy is. And Roman's, like, sucking on a little toothpick from the margarita. I was like, I remember having the thought in my head, I was like, oh, of course when Roman, like, actually, like, flirts with a guy, it's gonna be someone from fucking CPAC. Yeah, it would, wouldn't it?
Imagine cruising at CPAC.
Yeah, cruising at CPAC.
Jesus.
This is so dark-sided. And then it was even worse than that. He made that guy president. And
boo.
Boo. One thing I also wanted to mention in relation to Romankin, my brother is a watch guy. He collects watches, and he is part of the National Australia Watch Club. He goes to events, he comes back with pictures on his phone, and they're all watches that he saw, and he'll show me, and he'll be like, look at this one, and I'm like, okay. To me, I'm like, watches are like cars to me. I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty one, I suppose. But because my brother loves watches, when we would watch Succession, he would always be asking me to pause it so he could see what watches they were wearing. I remember when I showed John the first episode of Succession where Tom gives Logan a Patek Philippe for his birthday. Before the scene even happened where Tom gives that to Logan, my brother burst out laughing, and I asked him why he was laughing, and he said Patek Philippe is it's the cheapest one of the luxury brands. And he was like, so this guy is giving Logan, one of the richest men in the world, a relative cheapo watch for his birthday. So my brother has like interesting insights just based on like what he can see with the watches. But this has led to some very awkward things. Like I remember like the scene where Roman is first jerking off to Jerry on the phone. My brother was like, "Oh my God, pause it." And I was like, "No, I don't want to." And John was like, "No, pause it. You have to pause it." And like I paused it and he was like, "Oh," my brother like walked up to the screen and was like looking at Roman's arm and was like, "That's a Rolex." So my brother, and my brother observed that Roman typically wears like Rolexes, but he also noticed he changed to an IWC pilot watch in Honeymoon States, which is the episode after Logan dies. What's special about IWC watches, you might ask? Well, they're notable because they're a German brand that was favored by the Nazis. So it's interesting when we remember that Mencken did originally have a scene in this ep that was cut out, which I actually think, now that I've read the scene in the script book, it was better that it was cut out.
Didn't need it.
Yeah, I think it makes American decides like a lot more stronger. The symbolism of the watch, if you like it's still there and it's still very strong. And when you think of all the imagery that we get of Roman like a dog, the watch is kind of like a collar, if you like. You know, Roman himself, is it Roman that says he's like a dog without his person?
Yeah, when he sees Colin without Logan.
He's like, "Oh, that's like a dog without his person," and then cuts to the security dog that's showing up to signal Mencken's arrival. Interesting. You know, in case we needed like more obvious subtext to this, we do have Mencken literally sending Roman eggplant emojis and Roman running around like running errands for him all season. Congratulations to Roman Roy. It makes me crazy that the two most successful things that Roman did while his father was alive was, one, bring Matsson on board, and number two, bring Mencken on board. And those two ushered in the structures that ensured that the Roy Sibs would not get to be part of their own company.
Literally the most productive Roy sibling, actually, when you think about it.
The most productive.
He achieves the most out of all of them.
Yeah. Yeah, dog on a leash behavior is Roman and Mencken.
Yeah.
Because when you think about it, is capitalism not the dog that fascism has on a leash? Is it not? Is it not? Much to think about. In conclusion,
I'm taking over this fucking podcast because I haven't spoken in a while.
Yeah. Please.
In conclusion, I haven't spoken in a while.
To quote Cuddy in the famous house.
Okay. So just our concluding thoughts on the series. We've noticed over the last year that people misconstrue Shiv's ending as sexist, and they shouldn't do that. You know, it's pretty common in a lot of TV shows when there's a woman character that the writers will make her pregnant. It will like nuke her. Like they will nuke her with a pregnancy to stop her from proceeding in the plot. Yeah. Some people have seen this happening in succession as Jesse and co doing this to Shiv and reducing her to just, wow, women are there for baby. But the difference in the case of Succession is that it's exemplifying how institutional misogyny limits women's ability to have any power beyond associations with like domesticity and reproduction. And there's a point here to make about like the homophobia in the show too, except with Tom and Greg, which is, as we've said, is just straight up homophobic, where it's not that the show itself is always homophobic, but that this is a homophobic world where any expression of gay sexuality is going to be contextualized in a homophobic institution because that's what the show is about. And so
you can't make a show about the sewer and be mad when there's shit on the screen, you know? Like,
yeah.
Watching people react to Shiv's ending, saying that it was misogynistic, it's like, yeah, it is, because she lives in a misogynistic world. There was never going to be any other way that this was going to go. Oh, but I do want to say that Shiv's ending is only sad until you remember. Until you remember that thanks to Brian Cox and his interaction with Elizabeth Murdoch's husband, which he gracefully shared on one of the late night shows with one of the Jimmys, he shared with us that Elizabeth Murdoch watches this show with her husband. And I think that when you remember that, as devastating as it may have been for all of us to see Shiv do that, imagine how devastating it is for Elizabeth Murdoch herself.
So yeah, that's Succession, baby. Like if you're, it's been a whole year. It's been a whole year since since lives were changed, you know? And like, I still sometimes feel withdrawals, and a lot of people were as well. And I think if you are missing Succession, I think you should try taking a look at the stuff that's influenced it as well. Like, watch Celebration, the 1998 film. Stylistically and narratively, like, huge influence on Succession. Then of course there's King Lear, Lion in Winter, Autumn Sinatra, Network, like, just to name a few. Most importantly, we really think that people should just watch the thick of it. I think it's so weird that people will cite Peep Show as the go-to pre-Succession Jesse Armstrong show to watch.
Peep Show is not that good.
It's really not. And they never actually mention his work with Armando Iannucci on The Thick of It, which he wrote on nearly every episode of. It's so much closer as a blueprint or spiritual predecessor to Succession.
There are lots of, like, similar plot lines as well. In Thick of It.
A lot of similar
Succession.
plot lines. There's so many little jokes and callbacks to The Thick of It as well throughout Succession. That's very cute.
Little in-jokes. And we promise you, if you watch The Thick of It, you will appreciate more about Succession.
Yeah, also, though, Jesse Armstrong, he only ever wrote on one episode of Veep, but I still very much recommend it as another piece to Succession. Because Armstrong and Iannucci, like, they are friends with very similar ideas. And Selena Meyer, she is literally Kendall Roy in a different font. Like, where are the parallel gift sets and fan cams about them together? Like, they are the same. Like, I don't understand why people are comparing Kendall Roy to Dennis Reynolds when Selena Meyer is right there.
Yeah, I was literally about to say, why are there more fan cams of Kendall Roy and Dennis Reynolds than there are, like, Kendall Roy and Selena Meyer?
Yeah. So, yeah, I really, really would recommend checking these things out because... yeah, it will just enrich your enjoyment of the show. Like,
and it'll fill the void. It'll fill the hole.
Yeah. After Succession ended, I watched Veep in full. I hadn't fully finished it before, so I watched Veep in full, and I also started watching Industry, and those two, they kept me afloat. They got me through the void. Yeah, so there's the things that influence Succession, but also it's interesting to see what Succession has influenced in its time on air.
Pretty much always in the Emmys, there's always some guy with a crown and people trying to get it, metaphorically or literally. But I think for me, the most interesting part of all these Succession knockoffs, because there've been quite a few now, and I don't just mean shows that are literally trying to copy Succession, which I would argue House of Usher absolutely was that. But also, like, even within existing shows, Morning Wars / The Morning Show tried really hard in their most recent season to evoke season 3 of Succession. You know, there's also things like White Lotus, just shows focusing on the shittiness of rich people, which a lot of the time Succession is kind of reduced to. It's reduced to the rich people bad show, which, unless you can tell by the length of this podcast, we do not adhere to that description of it. I mean, that is a description of it, but I don't like reducing it to that.
We're not disputing it, but there's more to it.
Yeah. But I think the most interesting part of all these Succession knockoffs, it's seeing what the writers of these, I'll just call them variant shows, find most interesting about Succession personally, which is fine. Like, I think with Mike Flanagan, you can see he really liked the family dynamic stuff, and he liked the...
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. But I also think it's interesting when you look at these shows to see what the studios making these kind of competing shows think made Succession successful. The fall of the House of Usher, to me, is clearly Netflix saying, what people like about Succession is a rich family of monsters tearing each other apart. And White Lotus is like, well, what people like about Succession is the fact that rich people are horrible. And The Righteous Gemstones is like, what people like about Succession is the shambolic, bratty children trying to take over a dying business. And The Morning Show season 3 is Apple being like, what people really like about Succession is the big, scary company deals.
And also, there's just so many shows now made by people who think that the reason people love Succession was for the coarse language, and it really fucking wasn't. You really think that, like, you know, coarse language is just what helps people pay attention, and not that you actually need to make a compelling show. None of these variant shows, none of them hold a candle to Succession, because what people actually love about Succession is how rich it is, how deep it is. And there's so much more to it than just rich people being horrible or kids being bratty or any of the surface layer shit that these knockoffs try to zoom in on.
And most of all, Succession actually had class consciousness, which none of these shows really have, because a lot of them are still operating under the MO that audiences deep down still find wealth aspirational. Something Succession really rejected in its ethos and arguably like shamed its audience for within the show itself. Like, that's what the whole point of the character of Greg, the reason he's cringy and the reason you're not meant to like him, is because he's kind of representative of this idea that, oh, like, you know, you want to be rich and you want to be powerful. Like, no, you don't want that, because you'll be like Greg, and you don't want to be like Greg. One of the things that I think a lot of these shows also miss about Succession, even if they go through the motions of Succession, they want to look like Succession, they want to sound like Succession, but they can go through all these motions all they want, but they miss the point, which is that there are no like singular heroes, there are no villains, there are no secret demons behind the curtain. There is really just the reality that no one, regardless of who they are, is an exception to the exploitative rule of capitalism, and late capitalism specifically. And I think none of those shows really want to talk about that, because they'd be telling on themselves if they did.
Yeah. So, in conclusion, after I'm going to say 5 hours. In conclusion, Succession
many
is
hours.
quite gay, actually. You know, it's been 1 year. It's really the end of an era of not just of television, but also I think of this podcast, because we have spent so long actually working on this, because this episode and also part 1, it began its life as a bonus episode that we did last year in the middle of when season 4 was airing, because we just thought it would be like a fun, quick 45-minute recording off the top of our heads that, you know.
We couldn't think about anything else at the
because
time.
we couldn't, we're just like, oh yeah, this will be easy. This will be really quick and short, because, you know, it's not that deep. But then instead, you know, that it transformed into several hours of our life, like not just of what you're hearing on the final recording, just... just all the work that we've actually put into it, because it really is that deep. It really is that deep. And of course, like, it's still easy to enjoy Succession without this understanding, because there's so much to enjoy about Succession. It's such a good show, but
it's rich.
It's rich and dense
rich.
and full of
delicious
nutrients.
Nutrients.
I wouldn't say nutrients, the opposite of that. But yeah, we hope over the last 5 hours or so, Jesus Christ, that we've been able to show how the gay subtext is very core to the plot, and also to interpreting these characters, because us being us, of course, we're going to zero in on it, because that's what this podcast is about. And thank you for listening. So we love this show. We love Nicholas Britell. Happy 1 year anniversary to You Kiss Guys on Molly.